All right, in this video, we're going to be covering how to create a deployment template within Snap Deploy 5. Currently, we have our management console open in our Snap Deploy 5 environment on our Windows 10 machine. So from here, if you want to go ahead and make a template, you can go ahead up to the Action menu, Manage Templates. Go ahead and create a new one. Now, for the purposes of this template, you do need to have some form of image already created. In our instance, we've created one that we have here on our desktop that we're going to go ahead and select. You can choose specifically what part of that image you want to include in this template. In this case, we only have a single disk with several partitions. And from this portion on, this is where you're going to actually be specifying the actual deployment settings that are going to be utilized as part of this template. Just running down this list, for the purposes of their online deployment, you can either specify whether or not you want the bootable media to be used. Is either going to be the standard Acronis media, this is a Linux-based media, or the WinPE-based media. Now, by default, the Acronis media should be fine. The WinPE is going to be more useful in the event that you have certain pieces of hardware or drivers that aren't being recognized. On our second option, the target disk layout, this is going to effectively be how you specify the default disk that the image will be deployed to. You have your disk space utilization options, and this is basically just going to be an option of whether you want the image to occupy the entire disk that you're deploying it to, or keep it the same as the master image. So in the event of, let's say you have 3 separate partitions on the master image, selecting this is going to keep it as is, whereas this is going to use up the entire amount of disk space on the location disk. Our settings preferences, this is more going to be important if there are individual settings that you have for specific machines that you can set in a different section of Snap Deploy. But effectively, this option will allow you to specify if those individual settings will override any deployment settings that you set on here in the template themselves. The machine name and membership, this is going to be if you want to actually assign a specific name or a machine pattern to a machine or group of machines, and then if you want to add them to a specific domain or work group. You can set the TC/IP properties here. User accounts, if you want to create a specific user during the deployment. For instance, whatever if you have a specific user account that needs to be deployed in addition to whatever is already on the image, you can do so. Security identifiers, in our particular example, we actually can't be using this because we are already running Windows 10, but this would effectively generate a unique SID for each deployed machine. You can dictate what actions the deployment process will take after it's completed, either to shut down by default, restart, or once again, make ready for deployment. You can specify specific files that you want to include in the deployment that'll be copied over. Likewise, you can specify any applications that you want to run once the deployment is complete. From this option here, you can specify whether you're going to be utilizing multicast or unicast as part of the deployment method. Typically, the unicast is going to be easier on the network, as it's going to effectively process the deployments one at a time, whereas multicast is going to attempt to transfer the data simultaneously to multiple machines. And then lastly, you can specify certain licensing options, such as in the event that, for instance, if there are no deployment licenses available, you can specify how it's going to react, whether it's going to stop the deployment or use machine license instead. Our next section here will be the Acronis Universal Deploy and whether or not you want to use it. This is more useful in the event that you are trying to deploy an image to a machine that may have non-standard drivers or anything specific on the hardware that you may need to include. Just to give an example of what it looks like, we'll go ahead and use this. From here, you can configure your automatic drivers. You can also specifically add them if you choose. Likewise to your mass storage drivers. And then finally, we have a summary page here. If we go ahead and save this, you'll now see the deployment template that we just created. And that will conclude the video on how to make a deployment template. Please look forward to more in the future.